From 5,000 feet up, the valleys and hills of North Wales seem to level out. But as we look closer, there's the landscape I'm now going to celebrate. The green, rich, fat Vale of Clwyd.
We've plummeted down to the fountain head. And this little rill is the infant Clwyd, singing quietly to itself among the heather, the rushes, and the green moss. It rises in the middle of the Clwyd forest on the slopes of Craig Brombannog at about a height we're now standing about 1,300 feet. And of course the whole area has been surrounded and smothered in the forest trees. And I, for one, can never understand how the experts decide that this is, in fact, the infant Clwyd, about the hundreds of other little rills that come down. But here it is, the official start of the stream. And from here, this rather lonely place to which very few people come, it winds away for 30 beautiful, exciting, lonely miles until eventually it comes to rest in the sea.
The Clwyd trickles down between the trees on the high hills. And here's the first farm it sees, still as a stripling stream, the lonely hill farm of Brombannog. And the farmer is Mr. Richard Roberts, a Welsh-speaking Welshman. Up here they don't have much occasion to use their English.
Wel, Richard Roberts, di'n enw fi, ac yn byw yn Brombannog yma, y ffarm cynta ar yr afon Clwyd. A dwi'n byw yma ers 7 mlynedd ar 20 erbyn hyn.
I've lived here now 27 years.
Sŵr yn fan hyn yn pasio rwan.
And the water? Little enough in dry weather, but more than enough when it floods.
Ia, wel, mae Brombannog yma.
Oh yes, a mixed farm. Cattle, sheep, and a little milk. And best of all, it produces happiness for Mr. Roberts. These woods that surround the source of the Clwyd are no new thing. There were woods here for hundreds of years, and the memorial on Pincyn Llys marks the pride of Lord Bagot in 1830 in the sheer size of his plantations. Now the time has come for the Clwyd to leave the hills of its birth. In the little village of Melyn y Wig, the mill of the woods in English, it cuts down sharply in a narrow gorge-like valley. The Clwyd is small here, but the drop is steep and gives the little stream great cutting power. And these are the remains of the original woodland before they planted the big fir plantations. Almost with a sigh of relief, the Clwyd emerges onto the wide, fertile plain. This is one of the best patches of farmland in Wales. And the valley is going to be the river's home for 30 miles. The smoke of the stubble burnt after harvest shows that this is a farmer's country. Farmers who take pride in their farming. And all the way down the valley are the little snug, prosperous towns, farmers' towns, like Ruthin, the first of them, with its charming square and its Barclays Bank, which could claim as its first client King Arthur himself, since according to legend, it was on the Maen Hiail, the Hiail stone, that he executed one of his rivals in love. The houses and hotels of Ruthin are many of them 18th century. The square is a delightful architectural mix-up. This is the most be-windowed house in the whole of Wales. And they don't let anything go to waste in Ruthin. The old prison is now the county library. Of course, there's the castle. The old castle dates from the Welsh wars of Edward I. It was the stronghold of the great Marcher family of the Greys, and incidentally it played a great part in the rising of Owain Glyndŵr. And in the Victorian part of the castle, we've got the choir, made up of local people, from farmers to bank managers and teachers, Cor Meibion Mentle, singing the praise of their rich pastoral valley, Dyffryn Clwyd. The choir sing in the castle, with its red walls to remind us that the low-lying parts of the Vale are formed from old red sandstone rocks. On the valley's edge lie the beds of glittering limestone. You can see both stones in the church walls and the old buildings of the valley, and it gives them a special pattern, a variety. The limestone comes strongly in at Denbigh, the next town down the valley. The old castle, again built in great strength after the Welsh wars of Edward I, is perched on a high limestone crag. And the town walls are still there, although the main town has, as it were, slipped out of the clutches of the castle down to the bottom of the hill. A market town, and on market day the farmers take it over. It's easy to see why in the old days the Welsh looked with envy on the town dwellers, and the castle owners were determined to keep them out, for this was where the money was. But that was 600 years ago. Denbigh is now a Welsh town. And you look out from its walls to the long line of hills that guard the Vale to the east, the Clwydian range, a series of shapely, rounded tops. You can see them from afar, away over the flat Cheshire plain, and they are the outer ramparts of the Welsh mountain fastness. They're not high, they're all under 2,000 feet, but they make their effect since they rise almost from sea level. The highest of them, Moel Famau, is 1,800 feet. The Vale of Clwyd is a rift valley. Geologically, it's really a piece of the old red sandstone plain of Cheshire, slotted down between these hills of the Clwydian range and, on the opposite side of the valley, the wide, lonely moorlands of Mynydd Hiraethog. Sheep country, this, now growing dark with forests. Much older geologically than the rich valley below, and dotted now with great reservoirs. These level Hiraethog moors are in complete contrast with the up and down switchback country of the Clwydian range. Yes, this Clwydian range is the eye-catcher all the way down the valley, and it's a remarkable place for its collection of Iron Age hill forts. There are none on the highest summit, Moel Famau itself. That's got a ruined tower set up to commemorate, of all people, the Jubilee of George III. But on the less frequented hills, there are some impressive hill forts. Moel Arthur. Well, there had to be a summit named after the hero of the Celts on so Welsh a range. Pen y Cloddiau, one of the largest hill forts in the whole of Wales. 50 acres of it, with triple banks and ditches. And Moel Venlle, where, according to the old legend, St. Bino got a rough reception from its churlish ruler in the Dark Ages. He was flung out on this mountain side, but of course a poor peasant gave him shelter and killed his last pig to feed the saint. And lo, in the morning, the pig was miraculously restored. But the saint wreaked his dire vengeance on his oppressor. It didn't do to turn holy men away from your doors in those days. And so the high hills guard this snuggest of valleys. And I loiter on the little bridge at Rhuddlan. And below, the trout make circles in the still water. We are halfway in our journey down the Green Valley. The Clwyd has now put all memory of the hills firmly behind it. At points, it splits up among water meadows. This is fat pasture land. And it was high summer when I walked here. At harvest time, the Vale is patched with the gold of barley and wheat fields. And you can see why, all through the early Middle Ages, this land changed hands between the English and the Welsh. It was by far the most desirable farming property in the whole of North Wales. And when we come to more settled times, the farms turned into rich estates. The whole valley is spotted with manor houses of all periods. Here's the Tudor Plaza Ward near Rhuddlan. Plas and Llan, 18th century this, at Efenechted, complete with classical busts on the gateposts. Plas Ainws, with its tall brick Tudor chimneys, and pleasantly remodelled in the 19th century. And the most famous of them all, Berain. It's Tudor, the home of the celebrated heiress Catherine of Berain. In Queen Elizabeth's reign, she married 4 times. And according to the old story, in the churchyard, immediately after the funeral ceremony of her first husband, she was asked by Maurice Wynne if he could now marry her. "I'm very sorry," said Catherine politely, "but I've already promised to marry Sir Richard Clough. He asked me on my way to the churchyard." Well, like all good stories, historians have rather frowned on it, but looking at Llanefydd Church, I like to believe it. Now, one of the most interesting and attractive features of the churches of the Vale of Clwyd is that they're most of them what they call in Welsh eglwysi double, double churches. They've got 2 aisles of equal size, and all sorts of theories have been used to account for them. Some people used to say, well, of course, 1 aisle for the rich and 1 for the poor. And others said, well, of course, one family built 1 aisle, another family built the other. Or that 1 aisle was for the Virgin Mary altar and the other for the altar of the local saint. Well, I think the plain truth is that this was a pretty rich area comparatively to the rest of Wales, and there was plenty of money to build on quite a large scale. And they certainly are most attractive structures, these double aisles, and they all contain surprising treasures. Like this one here at Llanynys. And the Llanynys surprise is this remarkable wall painting of St. Christopher, the patron saint of travellers. And it's surprising how it ever survived, because it dates from the early 15th century. It was uncovered after centuries of being hidden under plaster. No one knows who the painter was, but one thing is certain. He was undoubtedly a master. Llanrhaeadr Dyffryn Clwyd, another double-aisled church. And here the surprises start at the church door, with its ancient woodwork and the stone on which the parishioners used to sharpen their arrow points. The roof supported by carved wooden angels, and many of the churches in the Vale have retained their original roofs. In Llanrhaeadr, it changes over the chancel from a hammer beam type into a fine barrel vault. And, of course, the tombs. The 18th century supplied this splendid one to one of the Baggots. The elegantly florid inscription with its balanced sentences celebrates the almost impossible virtues of this wealthy young man, and the polite lamentations of his wife and friends at his untimely demise, and at his unfavourable will. The church glows with colour when the sun strikes in through the stained glass windows. And it lights up the finest treasure of the Vale, the Jessie window. It depicts the descendants of Jesse and its 15th century work. It was hidden, of course, when the Puritans arrived, and the story is that it was all packed into a box and then buried in the churchyard. Some of the pieces got misplaced when it was put together again. But no matter. The general effect is magnificent. And so to the climax of the window. Jesse himself, lying in his bed, and with the trees spreading above him, the noble stem of Jesse, magnificently depicted.
Rwan te blant, beth am i ni ganu am Twm Sion Catty?
Now, we've been talking a lot about the Vale of Clwyd being Welsh, but how long can this continue? I was happy to find at the school at Rhuddlan the teacher explaining that the children were going now to perform an action play, complete with sound effects, dealing with the exploits of a celebrated Welsh character, a highwayman and a scholar, a South Walian too, Twm Sion Catty, the wild wag of Wales. And a dramatic finale when the wicked squire got shot. Then the great recitation. Gareth Williams, age 4, and his subject, a visit to the zoo at Chester. Now, Gareth Bach, pause for effect. When I go for my summer holiday, I go to the zoo at Chester to see the lion looking through the bars, with his tail wagging and his nose on his paws. Well, to me, it sounds rather like the celebrated Albert and his lion in Stanley Holloway's poem. Down from Rhuddlan towards the sea and the end of the Vale. Here's the ancient centre of the lower valley, the Cathedral of St. Asaph. St. Asaph and its district is rich in memories of the famous. H.M. Stanley, the explorer. He was born in Denbigh as John Rowland, but he was left as an orphan and sent to this workhouse in St. Asaph. It's a memorial hospital now to the lad who left St. Asaph so poor and yet won world fame after his meeting with Livingstone in Central Africa. And he came back to visit this house near Bodfari, which is also a memory of a saint, St. Bino, and his miraculous well. Well, not many miracles now, it's dry. And behind a cave, for this is limestone country. It's riddled with caves, and they're all rich in prehistoric remains, both human and animal. The mansion of Bryn Bella, and here lived Mrs. Thrale, the friend of Dr. Johnson. And he often came here, taking tea, no doubt, on the terraces. But poor Mrs. Thrale, she married a second time to an Italian, Mr. Piozzi, and the doctor's wrath was tremendous. Married to an Italian and a memorial tablet in the church at Tremerchion? It was the end. But near Bryn Bella, we're in another emotional world, far removed from Dr. Johnson's. St. Bino's Chapel, a Catholic seminary. And in the college for a few years lived one of the greatest of English poets, Gerard Manley Hopkins. Here he learnt Welsh. Here he looked out of his window towards the Elwy, a tributary of the Clwyd. Here he praised God and the lovely countryside in words that still sing in your soul as you read them. I remember a house where all were good to me, God knows, deserving no such thing. Comforting smell breathed at very entering, fetched fresh, as I suppose, of some sweet wood. That cordial air made these kind people a hood all over, as a bevy of eggs the mothering wing will, or mild nights the new morsels of spring. Why, it seemed of course, seemed of right it should. Lovely the woods, waters, meadows, coombs, vales, all the air things wear that build this world of Wales. Our last pause before the sea, Rhuddlan and its castle. There are plenty in the Vale of Clwyd, but this is the greatest of them all. Edward I's base when, with methodical power, he throttled the last independent principality of Wales.
Well, here at Rhuddlan Castle, of course, the Clwyds only got a few more miles to go. So it squares its shoulders and prepares to march down to the sea. And the man who taught it to march was Edward I, naturally. He had a whole army, nearly 1,000 fossatores, or ditch diggers, and he straightened up the course of the river in order to get his boat up to here to the castle, and the river is almost as straight, meandering through the great march of Rhuddlan, Morfa Rhuddlan, as he left it. And so now the Clwyd is coming to the end of its career. It's preparing to go down to Rhyl and melt with the sea.
Nid oedd pawb a ddod i ffyr, am haelw